During the prayer service, the Kedusha is considered a very special part of the service. We say Kaddish, especially the first part of the Kaddish. When we respond, Omen Yeshmei Rabba Mevorach, the name of God should be blessed from forever. It's also very special. I'll give you an example. During the Amida, once you start, you're not permitted to speak till you step out. When you're in that audience, you're not permitted to speak. The Mishnah tells, even if a Jewish king acknowledges you while you're in the middle of the Amida, you're not permitted to interrupt your Amida. Why? Because if you're speaking to God, there's the only thing that would permit you to interrupt if it's a question of it's life-threatening. Say if it would be a Gentile king, and if you don't respond, your life's at risk. So that's life's at risk, of course. That overrides everything. That supersedes the whole Torah in its entirety. Person's not well. He must eat on Yom Kippur. Eat on Yom Kippur. He must travel on Shabbos for medical reasons. Travel on Shabbos, or he must flee for your life. You flee for your life on Shabbos because life is premier according to the Torah. That's first and foremost. So person's middle of Amida, you have an audience with God, and if you don't acknowledge the non-Jewish king, you're going to forfeit your life. Of course, you interrupt the Amida. But if it's a Jewish king, where he knows the law, God's honor takes precedence over the mortal's honor. Therefore, you don't interrupt the Amida. You don't. So let's say middle of the Amida, and you hear them saying Kaddish. And you're in the middle of Amida, and you hear them saying, Amen, Yeheshmei Rabba Vorach L'Olam Olmei Amaya. Blessed is God forever and ever, which is the most special response of the service. The Gemara tells us at the beginning of Brachos that Reb Yossi, who was one of the members of the Tanoi period, he was in Yerushalayim, he was in Jerusalem, and he had to say the Shemon Esrei, the Amida, and he didn't want to be distracted. So he went into one of the ruins of Yerushalayim, the ruins, and he finishes. He comes out. Who does he meet? He meets Eliyahu Novi, Elijah the prophet. So Eliyahu says to him, "Why did you go into the ruins to pray? Why don't you pray on the road?" He said, "Because I'd want to be distracted. On the road, if wayfarers coming by, I'll be distracted. If I went into the ruins, a secluded location without any distraction." He said, if that's the case, you should have said an abbreviated Amida. Not this lengthy Amida. It's better to say, then go there. So Rabbi Yossi says he learned a number of things from Eliyahu Novi. Firstly, you don't pray in the ruins. You don't go there. And if you're going to be distracted, you have a right to pray an abbreviated Amida. So why? Because if you pray with there's a ruins, God forbid, you could have a cave-in. You're putting your life in jeopardy. That's firstly. Secondly, in the ancient days, if a person would want to have an illicit affair, the brothels were tucked away in the ruins. So people are going to say, what's the great rabbi doing there? Evidently, he has something going on. So to remove yourself from any level to be above reproach, you don't go there. So then after Eliyahu says to him, did you hear any noise when you were in the ruins? There's the ruins of Yerushalayim. He says, yeah, I heard the cooing of a dove. A dove was cooing. I sound the cooing of a dove. He says, you know what that was? We know the Jewish people are compared to the dove, as we mentioned the other day. The dove is that 3 times a day, God bemoans the fact that the temple was destroyed, that his children were exiled from his table, and his sanctuary lies in ruins. That's the cooing of the dove. Like the dove, he's crying. He's pained that his children are not there to serve him in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash. And he says, and when does he do this? When he hears the tzibur, the congregation answer, Amin Yeshmei Rabbo. He says, he nods his head, Kaviyocho, and says, woe to me that my children have been exiled from my table. We don't have that intimate relationship any longer. And my temple is destroyed, and the sanctuary lies in ruins. And also, when you say Kedusha, Kadosh, 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 we say, Baruch Kvod, also. It's like a person brings back such fond memories. It's painful that those people are no longer there to be able to enjoy life with them. It's that kind of thing, but much more. One, even for that, one does not interrupt the Amidah. Doesn't interrupt it. Because when you're having an audience with God, well, what are you supposed to do? You remain silent and you listen. You listen and you have in mind that you want to be covered by listening to what you hear. The Yeshmei Rabba or the Kedusha, the Kodesh, Kodesh, Baruch Kvod. That's what you just stop, listen, then continue. That's the law. But if be a Gentile king, you interrupt immediately. So the Gemara tells over a story. There was one of the interpreters of the Mishnah. He was in the middle of the Amidah, and as he's praying, he's oblivious to everything around him. A knight in shining armor comes on his steed, and he dismounts, and this Jew is praying. And the Jew doesn't interrupt his Amidah to acknowledge the knight's presence. The knight thinks to himself, as soon as this lowly Jew finishes the Amidah, I'm going to take my sword and I'm going to decapitate him for the disrespect that how does he have the audacity not to acknowledge me as soon as I come within his proximity? He deserves to be decapitated. So I'm going to wait, but before I kill him, rather than decapitate him when he's praying, let him finish praying, and I'll explain to him why he's being decapitated, and I'll decapitate him. That's what this knight says. Wasn't a Jewish knight. He allows the Jew to finish praying, and he says, do you realize the level of disrespect you just displayed? How do you not acknowledge me? He says, excuse me, but it wasn't a disrespect. But let me explain it to you. He says, if you'd be engaging with a conversation with the king, and a knight would come by, would you interrupt your conversation with your king? And if you would, what do you think you deserve? He says, you deserve to be decapitated. He says, I was engaged with the creator of the universe, God himself, the king of all kings, the king who coronates kings. Therefore, for me to interrupt, to speak to you, is like the person having the conversation with the king, interrupting to speak to a commoner. The level of culpability is not to be described. Therefore, I couldn't interrupt. That's what he explained to this Gentile, this knight. You know what the knight did? Got back on his horse, rode off. He understood it. Only a Jew is privy to an audience with God. I mean, Gentiles pray, the Arabs pray, whatever they pray. I mean, God, of course, hears them praying. God is aware. But in terms of meeting the criteria of what prayer is, that you have that personal audience. Only the Jew has that personal audience. Because just as the Jew is the only one who has a share in the world to come, is able to go into the inner sanctums to have a relationship with God, identically, to be able to have that personal audience with God, it's only the Jew. The non-Jew doesn't have that whatsoever. So when we pray, what do we acknowledge God as? As everything, plus the ultimate provider, whether it's our intelligence, whether it's our spiritual standing, whether it's our healing, whether it's our blessing, whether it's maintaining the judicial court system, whether it's supporting us, giving us hope, whether it's rebuilding Jerusalem, whether it's bringing Mashiach. We openly acknowledge that God is every one of these things, plus much more. And if you're sincere and you believe that, and you're asking for reinstatement, then God not only listens, God responds. But God is not always able to respond. As much as the tzaddik wants Mashiach, God will bring the tzaddik Mashiach, but the rest of the generation is not worthy. A Jew is not one individual. A Jew is part of a whole. So if most Jews are not worthy, you realize he's not coming. Could you imagine? Yeah, years ago, after the 6-Day War, there was a person who was the ambassador to the UN. He was the ambassador to the United States from Israel. His name was Abba Ibam. And he spoke the Queen's English. He was a heavy man. And he was an unbelievable orator with his South African accent. He wasn't English, he was from South Africa. And Abba Ibn. Could you imagine? You invite Abba Ibn to be the guest speaker, or Henry Kissinger. They're both cut from the same cloth. And Jewishly wise, some observance. And invite them to an audience. We have a bunch of illegal aliens, don't understand the word of the language they're talking about. The extent of their education is they don't even relate to what they're talking about, besides not understanding the language. And you invite that kind of person as the guest speaker to such a crowd. What is it? It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. But there's one person there who understands. So if you have 1,000 such people, okay, one such person. A non-Jew wants to have an audience. God doesn't understand what you're saying, but you can't understand what God says. We can't, the non-Jew has limitation. Because just as at Sinai, he rejected the ultimate, and he says, it's not for me. Not for me. When you said then, that means it's not for me, the relationship. I'm not interested in that relationship. But you understand, it goes hand in hand. If you have that relationship and you maintain the relationship, whenever you want to have that audience, take 3 steps forward, you have the audience. But a person who doesn't have the relationship, also now you want an audience, you're not qualified to have the audience. As a result of that, when the non-Jew prays, it's not like the Jew praying. It's like the non-Jew prays from a distance. The Jew prays, he's within the proximity of God himself. He's in the inner sanctums. You know, we live in a society of fairness. Got to be fair. God is not fair. How does he only patronize the Jew and doesn't patronize the non-Jew? They can say that. Jew has right to that audience. The non-Jew does not. So firstly, when you tell this to the non-Jew, do you think he believes it? Of course he doesn't believe it. Right? Praise, the way he prays and he believes, God responds. And God does respond. But not because you have no audience with God. For a different reason. The Talmud says in two places, so if you want to purify yourself, there'll be divine intervention and God will help you. You know, if you're in a coal mine, 5,000 beneath the ground, you have to send in all kinds of equipment to pull the guy out. Humanly, it's impossible to come out from that depths of the mine. But to fall into that mine, if it's not, there's no barrier. Closing the opening, you fall, you don't have to be helped to fall. It's free fall. Evil in existence is there. It's lurking there. You want it, just you go there. But purity, holiness, for the human being to partake of that, it's not available. Because we're so conflicted, we're so addicted to the material, and God, let's go, they extricate you from there and neutralizes you. You don't have appreciation of what spirituality is. Sabolatame, person wants to contaminate, they let you do it. It's not science. I mean, he assists you. No, it's free fall. You want to walk off the roof? Once you step off that roof, you fall. Nobody's pushing you any longer. You put yourself in that predicament. But to be able to be on the ground floor, reach the 1,000th floor, God says, unless I provide that elevator, you're not making it up that high. Well, unless I pull you up there, you're not there. So therefore, sin is not going against the grain. We're naturally inclined to that. We go in that direction. Therefore, God doesn't push you in that direction. But doing the right thing, you're always going against the grain, always. There's a famous word from Rav Noach Weinberg, from the Baruch, who's the head of the Isha Torah Yeshiva, Baal Tshuva. Says, how do you tell the difference between a dead fish and a live fish? A dead fish floats with the current. A live fish swims against the current. That's how you tell the difference between a dead fish and a live fish. So he said, which is simple. To sin, you were inclined to do that. You go with the current. That's just the nature of the human being. Because we're physical beings. But go against the grain, that's a whole different story. If I am this, how do I behave differently? It's not people battle. It's like pushing a boulder up a mountain. How do you do it? Well, if you merit, God's intervention makes it easier. He throws that safety line to pull you out. So here he says something phenomenal. Sometimes God will allow evil to reign supreme, almost wreaking havoc on the world, where you believe it's not correctable. Like today, I tell people, what could we do? One time, you would endow a chair at a university and put in a certain professor, which would profess a certain perspective that you wanted. You gave money to university, you had influence, there should be less anti-Semitism. Today, it doesn't help. It's not even a voice in the wilderness. You give money to a certain political party. Many of them rabid anti-Semites. They'll do everything to hurt Israel. That's the way they are. That's what they'll do. So what's the only approach? We got to do what we have to do. What is that? Hakol Kol Yaakov. We have to pray. We have to study Torah. We have to do mitzvahs. No ifs or buts. That's what you have to do. Okay? So why does God allow evil to run havoc on the world? You know why? Because when God comes and re-enters into existence, you will see God's glory at a level you can only appreciate something when by discerning between the negative and the positive. You're going to taste that bitter pill so badly, and you're going to yearn for that breath of fresh air of Kedusha like nobody's ever yearned for it. As a result of that, the level of appreciation, the level of glory of Kiddush Hashem, we thought it was all lost. It's all gone. Can it ever come back? You learn from that, God can always come back. Because God's always there behind the scenes, orchestrating things as they happen. So the reason why God allows things to reach a certain low point, of course, we contributed until a certain point for that. But why does he allow all this level of destruction, the pain, the suffering, due to this? Because ultimately, because God will reveal himself and show that his mastership controls everything. And even in retrospect, the suffering, the evil that we had was really God behind the scenes allowing it to happen. Because if he wanted to prevent it, it wouldn't have happened. Okay, I think we'll stop here. Any comment?
Scheduled today too.